Good to see you. All right, you ready? Mm-hmm. All righty, okay. Okay, let's see, let me just one question. How do I see your last name?
Andrade.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, good morning. We're here for one of our briefings. Today, we're going to really focus on Corona. We also have some other updates on economic development with respect to dealing with different Corona challenges. So, we are going to feature really just one special guest today. And she's the woman in charge of a wonderful organization here in our city who's helping make face masks. And actually, the city has such a high demand, we are contracting for that locally. And so we'll talk more a little bit about that later. Now, I'm going to go through a number of updates with respect to Corona. And these are, important sort of public notices. We're also, because Corona's kind of heating back up nationally, we can talk about where we're at as a city. We have Dr. Mark Demena here as well. But for us, we do need to get these updates out because we want to continue to keep New Mexico and Albuquerque in sort of the green column, and we'll talk about that color scheme next. So let's begin with some of those updates. Now, first, the Department of Health is going to be offering COVID-19 testing at Expo, New Mexico, 6 days a week from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., so in the mornings, Monday through Saturday. And this site is going to replace the Uptown testing location. So again, that's at Expo, New Mexico. You can register ahead of time, which is strongly encouraged, at cvtestreg.nmhealth.org. Loveless Women's Health Hospital and Vitalent are holding a blood drive Thursday, and you might recall that there's still need for blood in our community and all across the country, and the issue is indirectly related to Corona. It's just because there's fewer blood drives, so the normal sort of flow that we expect isn't happening, and so we're trying to encourage folks, remind them you can still give blood, and here's a great way to do it. At the Loveless Women's Hospital, Thursday, July 2nd, from 10 to 2, and this, is also about, because of self-quarantining in our state, and again, the social distancing practices, we do want to remind folks that at any time you can schedule to give blood at bloodhero.com. And you can also call 246-1457. Also, Con Alma Health Foundation, their COVID-19 Emergency Assistance Project Award grants to nonprofit organizations in New Mexico. They are doing this program, again, awarding grants to nonprofits who are dealing with COVID-19, who are providing basic needs, whether it's food, housing, income assistance for stressed communities. That includes low-income workers, frontline, other essential workers, communities of color, immigrants, indigenous communities, and people with disabilities. This foundation has these grants available. These grants can be awarded on an expedited rolling basis to help vulnerable populations receive the care and support that they need. You can visit conalma.org for more information. Please take advantage of that program. We're fortunate to have it here in New Mexico. The New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association has announced a second round of grant funding that's now available for COVID-19 local food supply chain response programs. And so this is another program. It's the second wave of this. We're glad they're able to do a second wave. You can check out farmersmarketnm.org for more information. And the deadline to apply is June 28th. So coming up, please apply for those grants. Now, earlier this week, we did notice, of course, in our town and all across the state that the Public Education Department announced some school reentry plans. Beginning August 3rd, all schools in the state will be able to start school. And of course, that includes APS, utilizing a hybrid model of instruction, meaning only 50% of capacity at schools. And in addition, we know that schools will be introducing enhanced preventative measures. And you can find more information by visiting NMPED's website. our office got a number of points of input on this, and people are very concerned about this program. So just sharing what our office has heard. And there's obviously concern about how education is going to be affected for children with a day interruption, concerns around younger children and the quality of online education. I think we saw preliminarily that it works in a lot of ways, but it does seem to be just opposite correlated to younger kids. We also got a lot of input saying, how can we possibly go to work with that kind of school schedule? So there's lots of concerns about our workforce, and we had this again during the summer, which is why the city propped up a bunch of summer programs when school ended early, was so that workers could actually go to work and there's somewhere for those kids to go, especially younger kids. So we're seeing the same input and problem arise. And so, we're going to begin talking to APS about this, but I think right now we're just sharing the input that we're seeing, that this is a major workforce challenge for our city. In Albuquerque, we have tens of thousands of families who depend on school for the education of their kids, but also so they can go to work. And so how they can do this, and again, employers are large employers, whether it's UNM or the labs or P&M or a lot of our call centers, how they're going to be able to adjust their schedule and so forth to accommodate one parent having to be home. That is a real question. So I want to remind folks, especially in Albuquerque, staying at home is in many ways a luxury. Not everyone can do that. And there are also a lot of companies that can't operate if one parent has to stay at home. So we're going to need a lot of help to figure this out. And again, from a city perspective, this is really about APS and the workforce, but we're going to try and at least convene discussions, suggest ideas on how our community can deal with this, and we're hoping that APS is open to some alternative structures for working parents. Okay, I think also with that, again, going through some of our updates, APD did have an officer test positive for COVID. That officer is in quarantine. The good news is none of the officer's colleagues have tested positive since then. As a reminder, we did move pretty fast early on to implement some best practices from around the country in our police department and actually citywide for city workers, especially first responders. And so there are a set of protocols in place to minimize exposure with the public and also with coworkers. And APS has sent out various directives in terms of how to also conduct business telephonically when they can or electronically when feasible, and that does include court proceedings as well. So these guidelines have been sent to our officers, again, trying to reduce exposure to the public, but also exposure to other officers so that we continue to respond to crimes when we have to in person. Now, some city services update. As a reminder, city park playgrounds are now open. They opened for Father's Day weekend, and each playground is posting signs to remind users to observe COVID-safe practices. That means if you can, wear masks. Obviously, for recreation, masks aren't required, but especially parents who are there, maybe grandparents, we're just requesting that people try and wear masks and also keep their distance from folks outside their household. And I think the biggest thing is just, wash your hands before and after visiting the playground and use hand sanitizer regularly. We also know that a couple of days ago, the Balloon Fiesta organizers, again, this is an organization that the city contracts with to run the Balloon Fiesta, they announced that Balloon Fiesta has been postponed. We're certainly, disappointed to see this tough choice, as we shared, to cancel our most iconic event. It's a family tradition for locals too, and obviously the biggest boost for our economy literally that we have in the entire state of New Mexico. It's the single biggest economic driver that there is. Now, because it has been postponed, we are going to try and work on some alternatives. They're not going to be as big or as economically fruitful, but we're looking at a wide range of options for safe alternatives for Balloon Fiesta this year. This might mean ABQ Aloft maybe over a couple of days. It might mean some smaller events at different parks and so forth. So we'll just have to see primarily the pilots are up for. I think that's the first piece, and we're in discussions with them. And then what the city might be able to support and also keep folks healthy. But I do know we can certainly expect balloons in the sky in October, because ballooning is a very socially distanced activity, and so I'm sure that that will be happening, as it always does, on a recreational basis. Now, I want to touch on our economic support for small businesses, and there's a couple of things we want to do here, including touch on the work that Southwest Creations Collaborative is doing with the city with respect to creating 9,000 masks for city departments. But before I get to that, I do want to mention a couple of other items. Number one, we announced last week that our Economic Development Department was awarded nearly $500,000 from the Kellogg Foundation. And first and foremost, I want to thank the Kellogg Foundation. They have been a long supporter of the city of Albuquerque and the state of New Mexico, and they continue to invest and to lean in our community's challenges. And we're very grateful to have their presence, and also the local team. Kellogg, part of the way they do this is they hire folks who actually live here to work on this and help us think through it. And so that has made these programs even more effective. So we very much appreciate the Kellogg team, both local and in Battle Creek, for their support for Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, this particular support is going to help workers get training and connect them to local small businesses in essential sectors as we speed up the COVID-19 economic recovery. And for us, we're creating a dedicated workforce development liaison for our small business office that's going to put this together. And that means being able to provide opportunities for low-income folks to get trained and placed in jobs that are actually hiring during Corona. So there's been a big shift, of course, in our economy in terms of where you can get jobs, industries that are growing versus, unfortunately, things like tourism, which maybe are not growing as much. And so this office is going to help transition, especially, again, those hourly or low-income folks to be able to get those jobs that are actually available during this special type of recovery. We're also adding an early childhood education navigator to assist with workforce development, and this connects to what I mentioned before about what was announced at the state. For folks on single income, single parent situation, and they're often working hourly, they need help to try and figure out how they can have a job and have childcare. And so this is what our city is going to try and step up on the early childhood care front. That, of course, is roughly from kind of birth through 5. There's, again, all those questions I brought up after, what to do with 5 years and up, but at least this position will help us deal with some of that early child care challenge. Now, for us too, we're getting, as I mentioned, some of these calls with respect to what the state has announced, and we are going to try and connect that with this Kellogg funding, at least for early childhood. But again, I think the challenge is really around, in general, kids who are of school age, and so that challenge certainly remains. But we appreciate Kellogg's help on the early childhood front. So we are also announcing a couple of other things here. We are announcing that we're waiving as many fees as we can for trying to get businesses and restaurants to reopen. So the ones we're announcing today are restaurant inspection fees, and we're also waiving swimming pool fees. This is a big one for things like whether it's like the JCC, YMCA pools that are being used that the city has to actually inspect and sign off on. And so we're waiving those fees. We're also waiving food truck permits and growers market permits as well. And so businesses that have already paid for permit fees in the calendar year 2020 should be automatically refunded in the month of July. So we're working on that from a technological basis, but hopefully, again, it's a way we can help. Businesses who've not yet paid their annual permit fees will receive a $0 balance through the end of the year. And so in addition to the fees being waived for restaurants to expand additional outdoor space that we announced a few weeks ago, this is on top of that. And so these dollars, by the way, we're able to do this because of the federal money. So the way, because these fees help fund city government. And so we're able to replace those fees, again, just for this year with that federal funding. Okay, now the city has also started purchasing masks. As you can imagine, with our workforce of roughly 5,000 employees, our city has started purchasing masks from Southwest Creations Collaborative. And so far they have made 9,000 masks for various city departments. And this is a business that is women-driven and ABQ-based manufacturing. They hire employees from low-income communities and help also provide things like GED, English language lessons, and provide low-cost childcare and paid school involvement leave. So they're really a role model when it comes to managing workforce and supporting our community. And to talk more about this, I want to introduce Maud Andrade. Did I get that right? Maud, come on up. Thanks.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Southwest Creations has been in Albuquerque for 26 years. We have been a manufacturer here. We're also a social enterprise. And we have survived 26 years by being a very nimble workforce. We cross-train all of our workers so that they can do any type of manufacturing and change the contract on a dime. So when COVID-19 hit, our workforce of about 30, we were employed mostly by supplying desiccant products that we make for Clariant Corporation. That takes up most of our work staff, but then our other staff works on other items for designers and whatnot. And their business fell off. So we could very easily pivot our manufacturing, and it became apparent that masks were the thing to do to help first responders and essential workers. But what we didn't do and didn't have in place was a connection to the community for distributing those masks. And that's where the city came in. Mayor Keller helped connect us to supplying the masks for essential workers, and also Lawrence Real connected us with various city departments. So we developed this mask, and in doing so, which I have here, I wear it all the time. It's very comfortable, it's durable, washable, so in a sense sustainable. There's no throwaway in this. Those masks have kept everyone at Southwest Creations employed through COVID-19. And like the mayor said, the women that we employ are from low-income communities. They have many of the same issues about childcare, et cetera, which we do have an on-site daycare. So to keep us going, the mayor and Lawrence Real, we're eternally grateful to them for helping us move our masks out into the community, connect us with the community. And we continue to make the masks. It's now becoming a product for us. And we would love to connect further with anybody in the community who needs masks. As kids go back to school, we also have size small and medium for children. So please contact us. We're online, southwestcreations.com. And I guess I just can't say it enough. Our thanks to the city for helping keeping us going and all the women that we support.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And we also want to touch on a few Corona items, and we're here with Dr. Mark DeMena from our Environmental Health Department. Dr. DeMena.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually wearing one of their masks today as well. And one other thing she didn't mention, they're very protective. They do a really good job of holding respiratory droplets so they don't get out. So we really like these. I think there's a general kind of concept that we've been wanting to address, and we're trying to make sure that people are clear on. We're still at a point in the pandemic and the storyline of this where we are in the first wave. Everything that's been done so far with talking about flattening the curve and closing things down and that type of thing was to prevent what you saw in places like New York with this giant spike of cases and the hospital system becoming overwhelmed and bringing ships in and that type of thing. In New Mexico, we've done an excellent job. The state has done a great job of setting the tone early, getting things going in the right direction. As you saw here, the city followed suit. We've made a lot of sacrifices as a community. New Mexicans have done a great job, and we've done a good job of flattening that curve across the board. That curve has a lot of sensitivity to it. So as people's behavior can potentially change as we go forward, if people stop wearing the mask, kind of give up on social distancing, have that big family gathering that they wanted to, come together in groups, that risk is very much still there. And there's been some fluctuation that the state has been talking about and pointing out over the last week or so in where we're actually at in terms of things like spread rate and daily case counts and that type of thing. So it's still a very sensitive spot. We really want people to understand it's absolutely essential to continue doing what we're doing. If you look around, especially regionally, we're surrounded by other states that are having a very difficult time right now maintaining where they wanted to be with that. So some of these states are already seeing fairly substantial spikes in cases again, and it runs the risk of putting us right back to where we were worried about being in March. We are still absolutely in that first wave of the pandemic. When people talk about a second wave, that assumes we've dropped down and cases are low. That's probably not going to happen. We're already almost in July. We're not seeing that big temperature dampening effect. And what we're really concerned about is in the fall when flu season starts, that's going to greatly confound things and greatly increase the risk and the severity of COVID infections. So we really need to get this right now. As those other states are seeing some of those spikes, they're going to have to make some very difficult decisions about closing down again. We're going to be faced with that same decision if we don't have good control over the situation. If New Mexicans continue to do what they're being asked to do, wear a mask, social distance, try to stay home. As things open up, as there are more and more opportunities to get back to normal life, such as it looks now, it's very tempting just to run into that full charge and kind of forget the last few months like a bad dream. But it's absolutely essential that people understand the risk is still very much there. The risk is the same as it was in March. So we just need to kind of continue to go forward with those things. We know now, we're hearing that Texas is already starting to slow down some of their reopening and actually even go backwards towards closing things back down. That's what's in store for states that have rushed forward too much into those things, and we definitely don't want to be there. So we have things in a good place where we can manage them here in New Mexico. We'd very much like to control that and keep it that way. As city government, we're going to be doing everything we can to make sure that that message is loud and clear, doing things for the people that we serve to make sure that we're reinforcing that. But again, we're asking the community to make sure you're seeing that as well, understanding the sensitivity of that. So that's really where we're at, is just trying to continue to reinforce what we're asking for at this point.
Okay, and to wrap up on this piece too, just want to, I think folks have seen this this map here. So good news is, we're green, meaning, we're showing some continued progress. But you can see the states around us, and that's why we wanted to share this. We know that state borders, are not necessarily meaningful in terms of how we live our lives. And so we know that a lot of us go to Colorado, especially Denver, Colorado Springs and kind of southern Colorado. We also know, of course, in the eastern part of the state, we have a lot of folks who will go to Lubbock and Odessa and things of this nature. And we're just reminding folks, at least in Albuquerque, from our perspective, just please really be careful when you travel out of state. Do the research, check on the county that you're going to. That's all very easily available on the internet. And try and take New Mexico-style precautions, even if you're in another state. So that means face mask, it means sanitizer and things like that. So we're asking folks to try and do that. Obviously, people are permitted to go wherever they want to go. But we want to remind folks that to stay green, we've also got to be careful if we're traveling. And again, we also acknowledge that lots of us travel to our neighboring states a lot. But the challenge is certainly Texas is red on this map, as you can see, and Arizona is red. Colorado doing a little bit better. But again, if you're going to like Phoenix and Dallas, please be careful. And if you can, drive. The number of potential contacts goes way up if you're flying. And that's just in general if you're flying. But if you're combining flying to a place that also is seeing an increase in cases, like at Dallas or Phoenix, you just need to be extremely careful. So we are encouraging people to drive and keep those kind of New Mexico-style practices in mind even when you're out of state. And hopefully that will help keep us green. And, we have been green for quite some time, and it's a credit to the whole state, of course, and to the city. And I want to mention, some states are showing that these regulations really matter. New York and New Jersey being green now is amazing if you think about where they were 6 weeks ago. And so I think it just shows that these regulations do lead to progress. And so we believe we're right where we should be in Albuquerque. We don't see a need to be stricter or challenge the rest of the state. We feel like we're right in step with the state, and that's a good thing, but we want to keep it that way, and that's why we wanted to remind everyone of this today. Okay, so I think with that, we'll take questions on these topics. We can try on others. We only have a few kind of experts in the room, but we'll do the best that we can. So questions from folks?
You can start with you, Jessica. I know the governor is having a press conference today, and you've said in the past that she sort of dictates, or the state level dictates where we go. Do you think Albuquerque's ready to enter the next phase if she signs off on that?
I think we're right where we should be today. So I think I'll take a look and see like what information she's sharing and so forth. I mean, in other words, I don't want to make a prediction based on what I haven't seen. So you can ask me after, and we probably can give you a better question. But as of noon today, before her press conference, we're right where we should be.
You talked a lot about the economic development efforts the city is making here. I know the county just put forward $5 million of its CARES Act money for small business grants. Are you intending to use any more of the city's $150 million in CARES Act money for small business grants like that?
So we've already used, I think we're up to about $3 million in small entity grants. So that would include nonprofits and businesses. And what we need to do is close our books for our fiscal year. We're hoping to do that on Monday at our city council meeting. And once we do that, then we can understand, okay, for the rest of the fiscal year, how much CARES money do we need for operating, how much do we have extra, and so forth. So we do anticipate trying to do a lot of helpful things with that funding, but we need to get through Monday's council meeting before we can be specific.
Can I ask a couple things and then come back to you? Okay, because we have like 12 questions here. So one from Ryan at GOV. He's asking if what types of alternatives or possibilities does the city envision for Balloon Fiesta?
So good question. I'm forgetting my protocol, so I will try and repeat the question, even just because there's people watching online. So the question is about what kind of alternatives are we looking at for Balloon Fiesta? And so here's what we're looking at. We're looking at the concept of ABQ aloft. So as a reminder, this is when a balloon takes off from a school, and sometimes it doesn't even take off. It depends on the weather, like it always does. But it's been a great thing for kids. Not every school has been able to do that historically. It's only a select few schools. So what we're thinking of is maybe we can actually do this for many more schools over the course of a week. But again, this is all dependent on pilots. You can't do any of this without pilots. So we got to talk to them about this. And other ideas might be some smaller balloon fiestas at like we've had at our golf courses, where people can kind of park and watch. And again, we've done this in the past in different versions. And so balloons might be able to take off from the golf courses, or we might be able to have glows where people do a drive-through glow. Again, this is something we've done on New Year's Eves before. And so these are all different kinds of options that we're looking at. I just want to emphasize you can't do any of this without pilots' desire and keeping them safe. So it's all pending on what the pilots actually want to do. But as a city, we know that we have the ability to open up city resources, be it parks, golf courses. We also know that we can help with traffic control and parking and things like that. So those are the kinds of things the city's putting on the table to discuss.
Okay, a question here from Chris McKee at KRQE News. We understand that the city has canceled the typical Freedom 4th celebration, but the city is planning an alternative fireworks display. What is the city planning for 4th of July fireworks?
The question is on 4th of July fireworks. And the city, of course, a while back, we canceled Freedom 4th. That is a giant, awesome mass gathering that in no way is a healthy thing to do right now. So as a reminder, we're not doing Freedom 4th. But we are looking at some alternatives. And we're looking at really some smaller ways to provide that large aerial display. And we're just hammering out some of the contractual details. So what I would do is say that we'll be having a more formal announcement on this, I think Friday or Saturday. But until we actually get the contract signed, we really can't speak to the specifics.
Thank you, Mayor. Another question from Chris McKee. The USL announced today that the New Mexico United will play a 16-game regular season against other regional cities starting in mid-July. What are your thoughts on this announcement, and has the city made any plans for how some of these games will be played, presumably at the Isotopes Park?
Question is about the USL and the United and their green light from their league to play a shortened season. And we're very excited about this here in Albuquerque, and we are in discussions with United about the best way to do that. And right now there is room for games to be played with limited spectator capacity. So this is what we're working through with our health department on whether or not we can have games with limited capacity or no capacity in Isotopes Park. As a reminder, there are other venues that the United can play in that might be bigger. So if they can find a bigger venue with limited capacity, that means overall more fans. So all of these concepts are on the table. Also on the table is no fans. So that certainly is a discussion that we're having with our environmental health department. Right now we're open to all flavors of United. We're just glad they're going to be playing, and I'm sure as we get a little bit closer to those opening games, we'll have some clarity. The last thing I'd say on that is that because it's a 16-game season, we might be able to do more later. So August games might be different than July games. So it might be the first few games, there's no fans, and then in August, there are some subset of fans in some different stadium and things of that nature. So again, right now, all those are on the table, and of course, we'll be announcing before the actual games themselves details around that with United.
Okay, another question here from Chris McKee at Caribbean. How much is the city's contract with Southwest Creations Collaborative cost, and how many masks will be made in total?
So the question is around our collaboration with Southwest Collaborations and the contract size and mask total. I'll mention they've produced about 9,000 masks to date. And Maud, if you want to add in anything else, whether it's open-ended or any other information, it's really up to you. Okay. Sure. And let me get the stool for you. I know this podium is really high, so we'll help you out here. There you go.
Yeah, so we've produced about 9,000 masks for the city, and this is for individual departments. So some of the departments we've produced for are transit, solid waste, environmental services, aviation, family and child care services. We are actively producing masks for adults and the children, small and medium, and would love to take orders, institutional orders, more from the city, and then we would also consider private businesses too. We generally pack these in packets of 50. We can do 1,000 plus. To date, separate from the city, just overall in what we've produced is we've produced over 100,000. So anybody is welcome in any other departments in the city, in Albuquerque, the state of New Mexico, to contact myself, Maud Andrade, or Susan Matucci, our director of Southwest Creations. You can contact us via our website. Our phone number is 505-247-8559.
Thanks, Bob. Okay.
So talking about the mass gatherings and, the little fiesta being canceled, in September there's a state fair. Do we know anything about that, and is it even safe?
The question is about the state fair, and this one, we are trying to sort of stay in our lane, so to speak. So this is a state-run event, and so it's even oddly on state land, and we really almost have zero jurisdiction over that other than kind of the traffic going in and out. But obviously, it's a mass gathering, and I would really just check with the state fair on what they're planning. I know they're evaluating a number of different options right now. And the decision point for a lot of these organizations tends to be when they start building in sponsorships and pre-bookings and so forth. So I do believe the state fair will have to make a decision certainly in July. So it's something will be coming soon.
Mayor, one more question here from Ryan Laughlin at GOV. What is your position on the City Council proposed sick leave and hazard pay for essential workers amid the pandemic? And what is your response to business owners who say it will force businesses to close?
The question is about some of the legislation going down to council, and I think for us, we are reviewing these. They came in on pretty short notice. We also know that I just got some more this morning, so I think there's a lot of different versions floating around. So I would say this, at some point, we do need to have some closure on the sick leave question. It's been around, it was on the ballot, right? It lost by just a few votes. So our city does need to address that in general. We also need to address emergency situations with our workforce. But on these specifics, really, this is going to come down to whatever gets to my desk, I'll have to look at, because right now there are so many different versions floating around. It's just premature to comment on a specific one.
What about the one that is actually introduced, that is on the books right now? Do you support it the way it's written now?
So that one is already under review, and there's amendments floating around. And so that's one we're just going to have to see what happens on Monday. And also whether or not it's studied, right? Because I know councilors announced that they want to delay so it can be studied.
Okay.
Others?
No more from Zoom, so I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.